public programming presentation via Zoom, courtesy of the Friends of WNYC Transmitter Park. My name is Lisa Iberti, and I serve as the chair of the steering committee for the Friends Group. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Friends of New York WNYC Transmitter Park, or FTP, we're a community-based all-volunteer group working alongside New York City parks. We invite you all to get involved and join us for Gardening Sundays from May to November, as well as our free upcoming on-site talks and walks in the park. So stay tuned. We'll drop a link in the chat for the Friends. But before we begin, a few notes. We'll be recording this program, so to be able to share it on our YouTube station, so please turn off your mics so we can have an optimized recording. If you're camera shy and do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your cameras. There will be a short question and answer period at the end of the presentation. So if you could just hold your questions till the end, that would be great. And we will stay on a little bit longer if the questions warrant us to be there. So we are already recording. So again, if you don't want to be on the camera, please turn off your cameras. Thank you for being here tonight. I'd like to say a few words of introduction about our presenters and our moderator. Our first presenter is Andy Lanset, who is the founding director of the New York Public Radio Archive for WNYC and WQXR. He has worked in public broadcasting as a reporter, producer, engineer, and archivist since 1981. We will be dropping Andy's links in the chat as well throughout the programming. Our second presenter is Lou Venech, representing the New York City chapter of the Living New Deal. His professional career spans 45 years, all in our city, including service as a mayoral aide, a civic association executive, and a transportation planning manager at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Now he's retired, he volunteers on many local fronts, including archival projects, transportation improvements, and regional food system reform. Lou and his wife live in Sunnyside, Queens. Again, we will be dropping Lou's info and Living New Deal info into the chat as well. Our moderator this evening is Julie Chou, who is a principal at Purpose by Design Architects, a woman-led architecture firm that specializes in affordable housing. Julie brings a deep commitment to community building and community service to her professional work. Through both her project experience and research opportunities, Julie is committed to exploring how cities and the built world can better and more equitably serve everyone. She has served on Manhattan Community Board 5 in Midtown for the past 8 years and leads a public bathroom working group with members from several community boards to advance access to public bathrooms in New York City. We will be adding Julie's information in the chat as well. Again, hold your questions till the end, and we will get through as many as we possibly can. I'm confident we could get through everything. Welcome, everybody. And Julie, I'm going to turn the program over to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And so happy to be here tonight with Andy, Lou, and everyone as we learn a little bit more about the transmitter building to see how we can envision its future and how it can better serve our community. I'm going to be efficient with our time, so I'm going to let Andy take it away. Thanks, Andy.
Okay, let me get to the right spot and share. Let's see. I just have to new share. Always. Let's see. Oh, right. There we go. So move this down. Sorry, folks. Just
Slideshow and play. 2 more over. You were almost there.
Whoops.
To the right.
To the right. Oh, right. Sorry. There we go. From the beginning. All right. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, Julie. Thanks to the Friends of Transmitter Park for inviting me, and all of you for attending tonight. I'm Andy Lanset, Director of the New York Public Radio Archives, which includes the collections of WNYC and WQXR. The WPA, the Works Progress Administration, was critical not only as a funder and builder of WNYC's Greenpoint transmitter site, but also its new 1937 studios, thousands of hours of broadcast and artwork for those studios. In fact, at the outset, I think it's pretty safe to say that the WPA saved WNYC from an early demise. Radio was in its infancy when WNYC first went on the air in 1924, but despite some really excellent efforts, the station developed some major issues that handicapped it as a non-commercial station in a very competitive commercial radio world. First, in the slide you see here, you'll notice that WNYC's antenna is attached to the tower of the municipal building on the left side of the image. Not in an especially good spot with all that steel in the building limiting the signal. Second, there was no real budget for programming beyond staff announcers. Third, use of the station by Mayor John Hyland for political purposes led to some bad press and ill will. And fourth, there was a protracted battle over its frequency by a commercial competitor, WMCA. So, after 9 years on the air in 1933, a former congressman by the name of Fiorello LaGuardia, I'm sure you've heard of him, was running for mayor, and one of the bullet points on his campaign platform was the elimination of WNYC. LaGuardia believed at the time that WNYC wasn't useful and that the taxpayers' money would be better spent elsewhere in the city budget. So despite the station's many Herculean efforts on shoestring budgets in its first 10 years, WNYC landed in a difficult position technically, politically, and programmatically. With the incoming LaGuardia administration in 1934, the mayor sent Seymour N. Siegel, lower right photo there, over to shut the place down. Thankfully, Siegel and others convinced the mayor to reconsider. It didn't close, but it was placed on probation, with Siegel taking over more and more of the duties of Christy Bonsack, lower left photo, the station director and a product of the Tammany machine. Reforms began. Fortunately, at the same time, the WPA opened up a critical mass of funding for programming through the Federal Music Program, the Federal Theater Program Radio Division, and the Federal Art Project, with the WPA murals dedicated in 1939. And of course, the building of new studios and a state-of-the-art transmitter site in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. Mayor LaGuardia approved the use of the Greenpoint property, a defunct ferry slip for WNYC's new transmitter, in July 1935, and construction commenced before the end of that year. So in just under 2 years, the site came to fruition. Pictured here are just two of the many WPA blueprints that we have for the transmitter building and the new studios on the 25th Municipal Building. The new studios, 6 of them, came online a week before the transmitter site was dedicated on Halloween in 1937. Here is a clip from the dedication ceremony with then Commissioner for Department of Plant and Structures, Frederick J. Crackey. And I should add that Plant and Structures was the station's parent agency at the time. The audio is courtesy of the New York City Municipal Archives WNYC collection.
May I state that the city, the Department of Plant and Structures, grateful to the Works Progress Administration and its personnel assigned to work in conjunction with this department for the splendid work performed, and from the very beginning until its completion. Ground was broken in November 1935, and in less than 2 years, a dilapidated, discarded ferry slip gave place to this beautiful new building that houses your station transmitter. I wish you people of the radio audience, those here assembled, could be with us and thoroughly understand the value of this fine building. That there is no finer station than your own WNYC, and is on a par with the highest quality stations in the entire United States.
That was Commissioner Frederick Crackey at the Greenpoint Transmitter Site Dedication Ceremony, October 31st, 1937. I'll also note that this is among the first of WNYC's own broadcast recordings since the WPA paid for lacquer disc recorders, which the station previously did not have. And you can hear the whole ceremony if you Google WNYC's new transmitter, that is WNYC's new AM transmitter, 1937. And here we have just a few of the many clips chronicling the building and celebration of the Greenpoint site. Particularly the building of the towers at the time and the help we had from Brooklyn's Technical High School as well. Slide 6 takes us to the new studios. The following description of the station's new reception area, pictured here, taken from unpublished materials written by the New York City WPA Writers Project, and they come to us again courtesy of the New York City Municipal Archives. They talk about this particular shot. The central foyer from which the studios and corridors radiate is pentagonal in shape, with its 5 walls covered by an enormous panoramic photograph of the skyline of New York City, taken from the tower of the municipal building. A circular map of the city graces the center of the floor, which with each of the 5 boroughs outlined in linoleum of a different color. So we all wish we had that a color photograph of this. And you'll also notice here the furniture was all Warren MacArthur Machine Age Art Deco furniture, which we have a few pieces of still in our collection. This is a small but distinctly unique feature I noticed in the WPA blueprints for the Greenpoint facility. And I don't know if any of the originals remain in the transmitter building at the site currently, but the light fixture was clearly modeled after a microphone regularly used at WNYC and other broadcasters at the time. It's an omnidirectional Western Electric 630A or 8-ball microphone. Named 8-ball since it looked much like a black pool ball or 8-ball on a stand. And also included here is a blueprint for one of the two 304-foot broadcast towers that were used, that used to be at the site, but were taken down after they began listing after WNYC left the site in 1990. We had relocated our AM transmitter to a 3-tower facility in the Jersey Meadowlands. Slide 8 takes us to the work of Alan Gordon Lorimer, an architect working in private practice and for the New Deal era Civil Works Administration. He produced designs for the Parks Department amenities under Robert Moses in 1934 and was active in the planning of the city's exhibits at the New York World's Fair. These Lorimer paintings of the Greenpoint transmitter site, which we hold in our collections, were both done in 1937, the year the facility came online. And I'll also mention that you'll notice in the painting on the right, the call letters for WNYC are accompanied by a north-pointing symbol. Those were lit up at night so that planes on clear nights flying overhead could get their directional bearings, and a reason for why all those airplanes are shown up in the mural there. The Federal Art Project of the WPA commissioned 6 murals and 1 sculpture for WNYC, of which 4 were hung and dedicated, along with the cast aluminum sculpture by Max Baum. 2 works not finished nor hung were by Lee Krasner and Louis Verstadt. They're not pictured here, but you can view them at our website if you Google WNYC and the WPA Federal Art Project. Perhaps best known is the mural for Studio B by Stuart Davis in the upper left corner, now at the Metropolitan Museum since 1965. Lower left is the mural for Studio D by Byron Brown, now in the jury room of the Staten Island Criminal Court. Upper right is Jean van Wyck's work for Studio C on the third floor of the Grand Army Plaza branch of the Brooklyn Public Library. And on the lower right is Louis Shanker's piece, which remains in its original location on the 25th floor of the municipal building. In the center is the cast aluminum sculpture Harpist by Max Baum, which remains at WNYC. I would say a particular note is that the murals are all abstracts, not a common genre for WPA murals, with them tending to be more social realist in presentation. And speaking at the dedication ceremony on August 2nd, 1939 for the murals was American architect and designer Eugene Shane. He spoke of the WPA bringing artists and architects together in building design and art, and of the WPA's effectiveness in democratizing art.
When the United States government introduced the Federal Arts Project, it builded better than it knew, because for the first time in the history of our country, we have been able to place before the general public works of art that had theretofore been almost exclusively reserved to the elite. The common man in the street was able to see what the common artist of the street was able to depict and to enjoy and like it.
And that was Eugene Shane, August 2nd, 1939, at the dedication of the WNYC WPA murals, sound courtesy of the New York City Municipal Archives WNYC collection. It may be hard to believe, as mentioned earlier, but WNYC had no real budget for programming for most of its first decade. Then in February 1934, the first WPA Federal Music Project sponsored program began, and within 2 years, half of our broadcast hours were underwritten by WPA music programs. And these included performances by the New York Civic Orchestra, the Negro Melody Singers, the Capitol Dance Orchestra, which was composed of blind and visually impaired musicians, the Amsterdam String Ensemble, the WNYC Concert Orchestra, and many other groups. Pictured here is Macklin Marrow on the lower right in profile, the conductor of WNYC's Concert Orchestra, the Capitol Dance Orchestra, in the upper right-hand corner, the Negro Melody Singers, just to the left of Marrow, led by Juanita Hall. And many groups were recorded on discs with labels like the one featured here in the center at the top. And in what was effectively pre-satellite distribution, the performances were pressed into 16-inch transcription discs and snail-mailed to radio stations all over the country. Also featured were performances by the WPA National Youth Administration, or NYA, musical groups like the one featured on the lower left of the slide. The Federal Theater's radio division started a unit at the station in March 1936 and aired many drama and information shows on the station. What Good is Art, New York Panorama, Americans All, Immigrants All, NYA Varieties, The Human Side of Art, Out of the Hall of Records, which was a drama series about New York City court cases, and an NYPD drama program called Police Honor Men. By the start of LaGuardia's second term in 1938, WNYC now is on a firm footing. The mayor brings in Morris S. Novick to run the station from his successful work at WEVD. And LaGuardia is now, believe it or not, gung-ho about WNYC. In fact, he wants it to become the flagship station of a non-commercial network of educational stations. Imagine that. The station begins to set the standards for public radio as we know it today, be it for documentary production, thematic music programming, public events, arts, and literature programming. And most importantly, in this period, we have new professional studios and a clear, strong signal from Greenpoint, Brooklyn, thanks to the WPA. The station becomes a vital clearinghouse of information on the home front during World War II, and what Novick liked to call a place educating for democracy. Everything I've mentioned about the station and the WPA and the Greenpoint transmitter site is on our website and more. In fact, I've created a separate compilation channel for WPA related items, which you can find at wnyc.org/articles/WNYC-history-notes/WPA. And if you go to the bottom of WNYC.org's homepage and click on audio archives, you'll find the department's articles and blogs and all sorts of other information that we put out there about the station history and the things that we have in our collections. And if you click on archive shows, again, at the bottom of the station homepage, you'll get access to 200 plus past programs series. That's probably somewhere over 5,000 programs that we've pushed to the web, along with curated collections for Black History Month, Women's History Month, Poetry Month, and more. We tweet daily at WNYC Archives, and I send out a weekly e-newsletter at NYPR History Notes. So I thank you all for your attention and time. Julie?
Thanks so much, Andy. That was fascinating and amazing images. It's great to see how much the WPA and the New Deal saved WNYC and was able to democratize the arts. Lou, we're excited to hear more about the New Deal. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Julie, and hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm fighting a cold, but I hope my voice will hold up. I need to share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
On behalf of the Living New Deal's local chapter, we appreciate the chance tonight to share how FDR's New Deal programs not only saved WNYC, but transformed our city in ways that benefit New Yorkers to this day. I'll say more about our group's efforts later in my talk. One quick example involves the Transmitter Park project. This past fall, we urged that the Parks Department instruct bidders to save and repair historic features of the building's exterior. Park staff included our suggestions in its request for proposal, which we appreciated. All right, it's not advanced. My apologies. There it is. Sorry. Everyone has some sense of how the Great Depression struck our country in 1929. New York City was in the spotlight from the start with the stock market crash on Wall Street. Here and elsewhere, unemployment soared abruptly. Americans who suddenly became homeless built shantytowns, so-called Hoovervilles, like this one on the right in Red Hook, Brooklyn. President Herbert Hoover mostly rejected pleas for expanded federal relief. In contrast, New York's governor, Franklin Roosevelt, committed scarce state resources to help jobless workers, farmers, and others. Promising a new deal for a desperate nation, FDR defeated Hoover in the 1932 election. At his Manhattan home on East 65th Street, the president-elect and his close aides crafted a far-reaching set of proposals. They aimed not only to swiftly relieve widespread suffering, but also to set the nation on a path to a lasting recovery. Taking office on March 4th, he moved swiftly, and many of the promised New Deal programs won passage in his first 100, one passage by the Congress in his first 100 days. Imagine that in this Congress. Today, Americans benefit from many New Deal policy achievements: Social Security, wage and hour laws, the right to unionize, federal banking regulations, without knowing their origin. But FDR also made relief of unemployment for skilled and unskilled workers alike a central strategy of his administration. Through the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, and an alphabet soup of other agencies, the federal government funded the hiring of laborers, engineers, architects, and other workers. They earned income and regained dignity. They also created a wide range of public works, many still serving Americans across the US. FDR radically broadened the responsibility of the federal government in the lives of Americans. Government at all levels, he said, must, if it is to survive, recognize change and give new needs reasonable and constant help. Government itself cannot close its eyes to the pollution of waters, to the erosion of soil, to the slashing of forests any more than it can close its eyes to the need for slum clearance and schools and bridges. New York City heeded that message more vigorously than any place else in the nation. New Yorkers leveraged New Deal funds to transform life in the 5 boroughs. Credit New Yorker Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, and it must be said, Robert Moses, especially for park improvements through the 30s. Here are some highlights of that legacy with special attention to Brooklyn examples. FDR spoke those words at the dedication of the Triborough Bridge. This proposed project was stalled by the Great Depression, but completed in 1936. Transportation projects are among the most durable of New Deal improvements. FDR also was on hand at the groundbreaking for the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel in 1940, completed after World War II. New Deal funds also supported initial construction of the Queens, Midtown, and Lincoln tunnels, the Whitestone and Henry Hudson bridges, the Belt Parkway, and many street improvements throughout the city. New Deal grants funded the extension of the city-owned IND subway line under the East River and into Brooklyn. Federal dollars allowed the transformation of North Field in Queens into one of the nation's first modern airports, championed by Mayor LaGuardia and bearing his name. Like many New Deal projects, the airport's Marine Air Terminal was graced with a mural by a professional artist paid with federal funds. You can see it there today, and this resonates with Andy's point about the distinct abstract art in WNYC studios, not much like most of the other New Deal art we see surviving around New York City today. In a famous phrase, Roosevelt spoke movingly of millions of Americans, ill-housed, ill-clad, and ill-fed. In addition to the homelessness caused by the Depression, thousands of New Yorkers in the city's older neighborhoods were still living in outmoded, unhealthy tenements and aging wooden homes. New Deal agencies made history by offering federal funds for public housing construction. New York responded by creating NYCHA, the New York City Housing Authority. Its initial project was First Houses, transforming tenement blocks on the Lower East Side. Here are before and after photos. The rebuilt blocks combined rear yards to create a play area for children, among other innovations. Williamsburg houses replaced building, LaGuardia supported NYCHA in assembling multi-block sites, allowing development of public housing on a large scale. Projects included Williamsburg houses, shown here, Harlem River houses, and later Queensbridge houses. New York City built more New Deal housing than any other city in America indeed. Williamsburg houses replaced buildings like this one and provided more than just new apartment units. This and other NYCHA developments included open space, community facilities, and other features designed to improve the quality of life for their residents. Many of the New Yorkers moving to NYCHA apartments left tenement kitchens like this one, with a coal-burning stove, a gas-fired heater without a pilot, and in the rear, a bathtub under the kitchen counter. This family moved into Kingsborough houses in Bedford-Stuyvesant in 1940, where the kitchens looked like this, here being inspected by Mayor LaGuardia. Red Hook houses, opened in 1938, is another major NYCHA project in Brooklyn. And Mayor LaGuardia was not the only famous visitor. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, a busy ambassador for FDR, toured several public housing projects around the city. New Deal artists graced Red Hook's public areas with murals intended to lift resident spirits. Like public housing everywhere, the Red Hook houses have seen leaner times in the decades since, with disinvestment by all levels of government. In 2012, Superstorm Sandy inflicted extensive damage at Red Hook. Now the development is undergoing extensive repairs, including installation of green technologies. Much of that work is funded by disaster recovery funding from Washington. However, These are one-shot grants, not ongoing federal assistance. Many city agencies advance varied projects funded by multiple New Deal programs, but not in isolation. They often reflected comprehensive planning to build the facilities needed to nurture healthy neighborhoods. The community center built adjacent to Red Hook houses is an example, offering recreational programs for children and families to this day. One of the most lauded accomplishments of New Deal New York came in the summer of 1936. That year, the Parks Department opened 7 large public pools over just 7 weeks, including 4 in Brooklyn. The Red Hook pool not only provided relief from the heat, but like its counterparts around town, it offered swimming instructions funded with federal dollars. That's something to recall when you hear about current efforts to expand swimming instruction, especially in low-income communities. All 11 New Deal pools are still in service and heavily used. Here's opening day at Greenpoint's McCarran Park pool, recently refurbished. Planning healthy neighborhoods also included major investments citywide in hospitals like Bellevue and Manhattan, and in 8 public health centers, like this one, built right across the street from Williamsburg houses. Most are still serving New Yorkers. The New Deal also burnished the city's collection of public colleges, helping to finish construction of the Hunter College Bronx campus shown here, now Lehman College, and building a new Hunter College addition in Manhattan, as well as conversion of Fort Schuyler to become part of SUNY's Maritime College in the Bronx. Brooklyn College is part of our New Deal legacy. FDR spoke at its dedication in 1936. Note the WNYC microphones. Federal funds financed the first 5 buildings on its campus. New York City also used New Deal funding extensively to build or improve dozens of schools in the 5 boroughs, including Franklin J. Lane, the top here, and others in Brooklyn. Board of Education projects included schools focused on vocational and professional skills, among them Automotive High, now ATEC High School in Greenpoint, as well as the completion of Brooklyn Tech and construction of Staten Island Tech. Many school projects included inspirational murals. Let's pause on this one. It depicts the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire of 1911, which killed 146 mostly immigrant garment workers in Manhattan. One of the horrified eyewitnesses that day was Frances Perkins, who later became a key aide to Governor Franklin Roosevelt and then his Secretary of Labor in Washington. She reflected that the spirit of the New Deal was born in the momentum for labor reform that was spurred by the Triangle Fire tragedy. Federal art programs reflected that spirit, employing artists to add uplifting murals to hospitals, post offices, other public buildings, and notably to children's healthcare facilities, including bottom right, the Kings County Hospital. Parks and playgrounds also were deemed essential for healthy communities. With LaGuardia's support, Parks Commissioner Moses took quick advantage of federal work relief funds to complete the design and construction of thousands of park improvements citywide, including at Red Hook Park here. This legacy included the complete reconstruction of the landscapes and structures of Central Park, which were badly deteriorated after decades of neglect. Notable projects in Brooklyn included restoration work on the Grand Army Plaza Arch and sculptures, re-landscaping of Fort Greene Park, development of the Prospect Park Zoo, and reconstruction of the Sheepshead Bay bulkhead and the Coney Island Boardwalk. In Washington Park, workers built a replica of the historic old stone house, partly with stones from the destroyed original building. The New Deal also left its mark across New York State through hundreds of projects, such as reforestation by the Civilian Conservation Corps in camps like this. The New Deal brought electricity to rural areas, infrastructure to support struggling upstate farms, and expanded parks and beaches on Long Island, among other improvements. Some of these efforts were built on previous state programs begun by FDR as governor, but that's for another webinar. The New Deal was not without some controversies and flaws, but its overall benefit to America is undeniable. Before turning the program back to Julie, I'll quickly mention some New Deal resources if you want to explore this rich history further. The Living New Deal website has a wealth of information, including upcoming events, recordings, and more. The website includes an ever-growing list of New Deal projects around the country, more than 18,000, including more than 2,800 in New York State, and a third of those are in the 5 boroughs. Most were submitted by volunteer researchers. Through the website, you can order a map highlighting major New Deal projects across the city. The Permit Project is another amazing online resource listing over 1,000 New Deal projects across the city. The city's Landmarks Preservation Commission has detailed profiles of protected New Deal sites with more information available from the Neighborhood Preservation Center. The Roosevelt House Public Policy Institute, part of Hunter College, sponsors exhibits and programs related to the New Deal in the house where Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt and their children lived in Manhattan before he became president. Roosevelt House's curator, Deborah Gardner, who's with us tonight, created a marvelous exhibit presentation about the New Deal in New York City, and she worked with me to adapt it for tonight's event. And of course, we welcome your participation with us in the Living New Deal's active New York City chapter. We work to preserve the city's New Deal history, including things like the Transmitter Project. We sponsor tours and public policy panels, and we advocate for federal investments to meet the needs and opportunities in our era, as FDR's New Deal did beginning 90 years ago, and still working for America today. Find out more about us on our section of the Living New Deal website. Thanks for your attention. Back to you, Julie.
Thanks so much, Lou. That's fascinating to see how much of an impact the New Deal had. And working in housing, I had no idea that public housing and NYCHA came out of the WPA. It's really interesting. I have a bunch of questions, but I'm gonna maybe start out with a couple and then open up to the participants to join in. Andy, Lou, we know how much history can strengthen our neighborhoods today, so it's really exciting to be speaking with you. Just to start, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background and your interest in history.
Okay, well, I started out as a reporter, got more into historical features and documentary work, which led to, along with my engineering and recording work, kind of led to preservation work as well, and eventually to archives and starting the department at WNYC in 2000.
As Alyssa mentioned at the beginning, most of my career is, all of my career in New York City, and most of it working on public improvements, infrastructure, transportation, federal aid, pursuing, trying to use it to best. And I've also had a long interest in New York City history. The relevance of the, to our community today and the issues the country is facing is something that seems very vivid to me. And I'll just note that my grandchild is a kindergartner in a New Deal school in the Bronx. So these projects in all parts of the city continue to serve me.
That's amazing. Thank you both. So I'm curious how this building came to be in Greenpoint and how the transmitter building may have influenced the neighborhood when it was in operation, I think for over 53 years or so. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Well, as far as I know, obviously the FCC had a role to play in terms of the siting of the transmitter site in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, had to do with the signal surveys and power of the transmitter involved, and efforts not to interfere with WCCO in Minneapolis, which was a clear channel station on the same frequency at the time. This, of course, WNYC AM was not a 24-hour station, so they had to go off the air at sundown with a special dispensation permitted during World War II to stay on a little later. And that was one of the reasons why we ended up moving in 1990 to out to Kearny, the new transmitter site, because actually our frequency changed from 8:30 a.m. to 8:20 a.m. So we would be less likely to interfere, and also it allowed the AM station to stay on 24 hours a day with reduced power after sunset. You have an issue with AM stations interfering with each other, more so at night because the AM signals travel farther. So that's always an issue when you're dealing with clear channel stations versus stations that don't have that permission to go out to a wider area.
The site actually provides an interesting lens on the evolution of things in the city. It started out perhaps in 1840 as a ferry connector from Greenpoint to Manhattan before there were bridges or tunnels or subways to get people from one community to another. Then the service failed during the Depression. The city quickly took advantage of this site, which it had come into the ownership of. And then when it finished its life as the home of the transmitter, it eventually became a beautiful little city waterfront park as the city started to reclaim waterfront real estate. And now we see it perhaps, further evolving into a more enhanced facility in a changing neighborhood.
Yeah, that's actually a great segue about the future of Transmitter Park. What can we learn from the New Deal in shaping the future of our city and our public spaces? Could you, maybe this question is more directed to you, Lou. What can we learn from?
Well, I think the evolution of the park in recent decades and the issues to be addressed in the future, the two words come to mind: stewardship and investment. Cherishing facilities like these as public assets that the community can enjoy is important, and none of these things sustain themselves. Much of the value of the New Deal was that it arrived in New York at a time when so many of our parks and other facilities were very deteriorated. And what was done with New Deal funding in the parks and elsewhere is an example of the importance of public investment for community facilities that make our neighborhoods livable and enjoyable.
Yeah, it's interesting what you just said, and a lot of your content, I feel like things haven't changed that much from back then, and we're kind of still addressing the same issues. But I want to open it up to the public, to the participants, and see if they have any questions.
Yeah, I had a quick question for I think Andy. Yeah, I know you just went over this a second ago, but I wonder if you could say more. I didn't catch exactly why WNYC left Greenpoint. What all the various reasons might have been for that. Sure.
Well, basically, NYC was struggling for many years with the fact that, we started at 570 AM, then there was a fight with WA, and we ended up at 810 AM. And we always had to shut off. Once we moved to 810, we had to shut down at sundown because, again, our signal was going to interfere with a clear channel station out in Minneapolis. Even after we shifted to 8:30 AM in the early 40s. So that was always a problem with the station having to shut down at sundown and have a limited broadcast time. And so they were struggling. Actually, it was a long court case, probably the longest in FCC history, between WNYC and WCCO in Minneapolis. But we finally got the approval to go 24 hours. But in order to do that, we had to shift to 8:20 AM, which meant moving the transmitter out to the Jersey Meadowlands, because at 8:30 we couldn't stay with the signal strength and so forth at that location in Brooklyn. So that's why our tenure in Greenpoint was 1937 to 1990. And then we moved out to the Jersey Meadowlands for the AM, and the AM could stay on the air 24 hours a day.
Oh, so that seemingly short move across the map from Brooklyn to the other side of the Hudson was enough to iron out the
Well, it was
frequency.
enough. It was enough along with a certain reduction in power at night. I don't know if you've ever noticed the AM signal after sundown. I don't know at what time exactly during the evening, but definitely there's a reduction in power, and you can hear that shift on the AM signal.
Andy, can you elaborate what is a clear channel station?
A clear channel station, as I understand it, is a station that has a special license with the FCC. There's a limited number of them in a given area or region, and it allows the station, an AM station that is, to continue broadcasting at full power throughout the night. And it becomes an issue because, as I mentioned, the AM signals, unlike FM signals, at nighttime, because there's no solar interference, tend to travel farther. I actually get occasional emails from what we call shortwave listeners or DXers in Scandinavia, because they end up late at night picking up our AM signal, which actually manages to get up to places in Finland and along the Arctic Circle. It's a faint reception, but they hear it nonetheless, and it's a big hobby up there. So they want confirmation that they heard us at the right time and the signal strength and so on. And so those signals travel farther at night, hence the reduction in power.
Interesting. So to check if there's any other questions.
I have a few questions. My first question, well, I don't know who will be able to answer, but I'll give you both my questions first. My first question is, the huge WNYC letters on the building are so cool. I feel like I've only seen like a frontal image of them before, but I can't remember if it was Andy's photo or Lou's photo. There was like a 3/4 angle, and they look really dimensional. I can't tell if part of it was sunken into the building or if they're dimensional on top. And if anybody knows what happened to those letters, they look so cool on the building. It'd be amazing to have them back on there. But my more like serious question is about just kind of, I guess, do you guys know of any protection for buildings like this in terms of like preservationist protection? And also if there's any funding for preservation for buildings like this? Like, I've done research, and I can find certain groups and preservation groups, but it mostly deals with the artwork involved with the WPA seems to be a little bit more protected or easy to get possible federal funding to help it. And then some of like parks buildings, but because this building is kind of like a commercial building, it's hard to find a specific case study similar to a building like this, as opposed to some of the more like popular art projects, if that makes sense.
Lou, why don't you go first? I can talk about the letters.
That restoring those letters was one of the things that that our Living New Deal chapter asked parks to include in the specs, and as I recall it was included. As far as the protection of the building, it has the protection of belonging to the city of New York. So the city can make a determination about what's to be done with it. That said, it's in a very deteriorated state. It's an expensive rehab. There's lots of competition for resources. So how best to accomplish the rescue of the building, if you will, and the restoration of the historic features, it's really a challenge. There are a variety of particularly federal programs right now that the city could try to tap into, but again, there are many competing needs, including for facilities that some would consider to be less ornamental, if you will, than this beautiful enhancement to the park.
Yeah.
I hope that helped.
Yeah, thanks.
I think the call letters that were embedded in the ground, I think, are long gone. The ones that are depicted in that Lorimer painting. As far as the building, I'm not sure about the front where that material went. Those call letters went, and I know we have photographs of the side of the building with the call letters on it. The building was white with black lettering on taking up the entire western side of the transmitter building. It said WNYC with lights on it at night. So if you were
So it's
curious
just
about,
Trump loyal.
I'm sorry.
It's just Trump loyal painted. It's not an actual dimensional letter.
Yeah, I know on the side. I'm not sure about the front. I think there used to be some sort of deco neon, but I think that's long gone.
Mm. Thank you.
So there's a couple of questions in the chat. What can we do with the building now? From Louis.
I don't know that I'm the best person to answer that, but obviously Parks sees the potential to reactivate the building and introduce use the device of a concessionaire as they've used elsewhere to bring it back to life. In its present state, I think Alyssa would know better than me. I think the Parks is perhaps using part of the interior, or maybe not even.
I think the things sort of came to a head last summer because we were just discussing the lack of the bathroom, and that's how we met Julie, and this whole conversation sort of started about the lack of restrooms in a lot of public spaces and throughout the city. And so that's what started this conversation about how we could get a bathroom in the park. So what could be done with the building now? Andy would know it has a very small square footage. It had a dedicated sort of service. It did have a basement, I believe. So right now, there is a request for proposal out from Parks to try and get some sort of concessionaire to repair the building, renovate the building. And we're all sort of working together to have this vision put back together so it does its justice. In that request, we would love to have a community space, some place for parks. And, again, in the original waterfront plan, there was a call for a cafe there. So, these are the things that are being talked about. The public bathroom is probably the biggest need in the park, because it's not only needed for the residents and people who visit, but it's also needed for the workers who come through the park. And Julie, you could talk a little bit more, I guess, about your work and, how we are a city that lacks these amenities.
Yeah, we actually took a stab and created a visual for the transformed version of this transmitter building. And in speaking with Lou about the New Deal, we wanted to preserve the design of the building, but at the same time, funding is a big deal for public bathrooms. So, in learning about the New Deal and all the support it had, we were trying to be creative, and we're considering the Infrastructure and Jobs Act and trying to create co-benefits so that the transmitter building not only would serve as bathrooms and public space for the community, but it can also, mitigate some of the climate effect issues with sustainability, resilience for our community, whether it's solar renewables, a PV panel that can offer shade, looking at rainwater harvesting, reuse of gray water, but taking funding for the city's focus on addressing climate and using it to support public bathroom facilities. So that was our angle. And
I think what you're saying is also important, because there was this plan by the Army Corps of Engineers to include you know, part of the park in a solution. So I think whatever happens with the building, that would be the upgrade to figure out how it gets put back together with more sustainable and reusable facilities. But again, it's a very, I mean, again, Andy and Lou can speak to this. It's a pretty basic design. It's like a bunker. So it's not like we're dealing with, you know, an overreaching design factor. It's just that we need to, you know, do homage to its integrity.
Lou?
I see my colleague, Deborah Gardner from Living New Deal has pointed out in the chat that if the city had landmarked the building, that might open up some additional funding resources. Again, it's city owned, so fundamentally that's protective. And what kind of resources open up by landmarking something that's already owned by the city? I think the answer is some, not necessarily all. So
We did reach out to historic architecture consultant about historic tax credits as a means of funding, but there's so many restrictions involved in terms of preserving the interiors as well. And the loss of the antennas affects the designation, but there's definitely, you know, yeah, avenues to explore there. I just want to check the chat for any other questions. Adam, you had a question about food kiosk, maybe in the building.
Like they answered it. I actually found the RFP we're mentioning. I'll pop it in the chat. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
A boathouse was a comment in the chat that we could use for the building. And then a question about the WPA furniture. WPA furniture movement. They're wondering if there was if that happened.
That one's outside of my expertise. I do know that for some of the projects to build lodges in national parks, for instance, that the scope of work included building rustic furniture. There may also have been, you know, around supporting craftspeople, some other support, at least in terms of employment for artisans to create furniture. But I don't know the answer. I couldn't give you a confident answer.
But it's interesting how diverse the WA and New Deal program was, and how varied the funding went towards. I guess the last comment, could one reuse include a community internet radio station that will honor the original use of the building?
It's sort of like what we're doing with the Germination Station now. So we're sort of having these dialogues and sort of maybe planting some seeds. So we don't know, but this is sort of the beginning of these conversations, obviously. So get involved, stay tuned, and we'll see where this goes. But we're very happy to have everybody on this call and, you know, our colleagues and friends here. It's perplexing, but I feel confident we could do something.
I know we're over.
We can take one last question, but then I think we have to sort of sign off. Is there any other? Yeah, and Steve put in the chat, if you want to get involved, just click on Transmitter Park and come by and see us. And yeah, thank you so much to our presenters. Andy, Lou, Julie, thank you so much. Thank you for everybody for coming. And yeah, we look forward to the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.